we've been ready for every single scenario. We've been working at this. Some industries have been affected by the trade war for the past year and have shown great resiliency, and we've been working with business leaders, unions, employees themselves. And so we have a mandate from the Canadian public to build Canada strong, to make sure that we can create jobs, notwithstanding what's going south of the border. And that is exactly why we're here today. We're announcing 500 new jobs, and we know we can grow this economy and we can diversify our markets around the world to make sure that we reduce our dependency on the US market.
Canada is making a move Washington may not see coming. Mark Carney is holding something back while Canada takes a much stronger stand in the trade fight. The message is clear. If Canada uses its leverage at the right moment, it could gain the upper hand and leave the US facing a serious problem. Mark Carney's government is preparing for the possibility of a deeper trade fight with the United States, while Ottawa also works to reduce Canada's heavy dependence on the American market. With a major tariff deadline approaching, the next moves could reshape North American trade. The pressure is now building around CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement. The agreement remains fully in force until 2036, but its first joint review began on the 1st of July 2026. That review gives Canada, the United States, and Mexico a chance to discuss changes and decide whether to extend the agreement for another 16 years. The United States has already chosen not to extend CUSMA immediately. The July 1 decision did not end the agreement. Instead, it opened the door to tougher negotiations over its future terms. Canada and Mexico had previously said they wanted the agreement extended, while the United States moved toward renegotiation. For Canada, the timing is serious because American tariffs are already affecting major Canadian industries. Canadian officials have identified steel, aluminum, automobiles, and softwood lumber among the sectors facing U.S. tariff measures. Ottawa has said it will continue talks with Washington while defending Canadian interests in those sectors. The latest pressure became even clearer on August 5. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada was prepared to take a tougher position if a trade agreement was not reached before August 19, when a new round of U.S. tariffs was expected to take effect. Carney said, "The time to get tougher will be if there is a moment where there isn't a deal with the Americans." He did not give a detailed list of possible Canadian responses, but said Canada had options. At the same time, Ottawa has been talking about reducing its economic dependence on the United States. In May, Carney said Canada needed new trade relationships so the country could move from reliance to resilience. His government has also placed greater attention on relations with Europe and on strengthening Canada's economic position at home. This matters because the United States remains Canada's most important trading partner, while Canadian businesses depend heavily on access to the American market. The CUSMA review therefore affects much more than government negotiations. Changes to tariffs, rules, and market access could affect companies operating across North America and the supply chains connecting the three countries. The possible changes being discussed by the United States are also significant. A June 2026 analysis from Marsh identified stricter rules of origin, stronger enforcement, and closer alignment of external tariff and investment policies among the three countries as major U.S. priorities. For the automobile sector, the report said Washington wants the vehicle rule of origin increased from 75% to more than 80%, along with a requirement that 50% of vehicle content come from the United States. That proposal could create major pressure for parts of Canada's auto supply chain. Marsh specifically noted that a 50% U.S. origin requirement could have a severe effect on some Canadian auto suppliers. The issue shows why Ottawa is approaching the review as a major economic negotiation rather than a routine renewal of an existing agreement. The Canadian government is also preparing for the possibility that the CUSMA talks will not produce a quick agreement. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc has said Canada is approaching the review with a clear focus on protecting Canadian workers, businesses, and economic interests. Ottawa has also been consulting provinces and territories because trade rules affect industries across the country. Canada's strategy is not limited to negotiations with Washington. And if you want the real story behind how Canada is still holding its ground through tariffs, wars, and hard times, hit join below to join the membership for exclusive documentaries you won't see anywhere else about Canada's progress and rise through uncertainty. The federal government has been working to expand Canada's trade relationships outside the United States. Ottawa has pointed to agreements and partnerships with countries in Europe and the Indo-Pacific as part of a broader effort to create more markets for Canadian companies. The purpose is to give Canadian exporters more options if access to the US market becomes more difficult. The numbers explain why this matters. Canada and the United States have one of the world's largest trading relationships, with goods and services moving across the border every day. Canadian manufacturers rely on American customers, while American companies also depend on Canadian energy, materials, parts, and other products. A major disruption would therefore affect supply chains on both sides of the border. Energy is one of the clearest examples. Canada is a major supplier of crude oil and other energy products to the United States. The two economies are also connected through electricity, natural gas, minerals, manufacturing, and transportation networks. These links make a complete separation unrealistic, but they also give both governments strong reasons to protect access to the North American market. The tariff issue has added another layer of uncertainty. Canada has already responded to US tariff measures with countermeasures on selected American goods. Ottawa has also removed some of its earlier counter tariffs on US consumer goods, while keeping measures on products such as steel, aluminum, and automobiles. The changes show that Canada's trade response can be adjusted as negotiations develop. The automobile industry remains one of the most sensitive parts of the dispute. Vehicles and parts are produced through supply chains that cross the Canada-US border many times before a finished vehicle reaches a customer. A change in CUSMA rules could therefore affect where companies build vehicles, where they purchase parts, and how they calculate the origin of those products. The proposed US changes to automobile rules could make those decisions even more important. The Marsh analysis said Washington is seeking stronger rules that would increase the share of vehicle content required from North America and add a major US-specific content requirement. Canadian officials and industry groups are watching these proposals because Canadian plants and suppliers are deeply connected to the American auto industry. Steel and aluminum are facing their own problems. These industries have already been affected by US tariff actions. Canada has argued that Canadian metals support American manufacturing because the two countries operate closely connected supply chains. Any new restrictions could therefore create costs for companies in both countries. Softwood lumber is another long-running trade dispute between Canada and the United States. Canadian lumber producers have faced US duties for years, and the issue remains part of the wider trade relationship. The CUSMA review is taking place while these separate disputes continue, giving Canadian negotiators several issues to address at the same time. The political message from Ottawa has also changed. Instead of treating the US market as Canada's only major economic option, the government is putting more attention on diversification. That does not mean Canada is ending trade with the United States. It means Ottawa is trying to reduce the risks created by depending too heavily on one market. Carney has also said the relationship with the United States is changing. The Canadian government is therefore preparing for different possible outcomes from the CUSMA process. One outcome could be an agreement that preserves much of the existing system. Another could involve major changes to the rules. A prolonged dispute could also create uncertainty for businesses that need to make investment decisions before the final terms are known. The next stage of the review will be closely watched because the agreement affects Canada, the United States, and Mexico at the same time. Any major change to the rules could alter how companies organize production across North America. For Canadian businesses, access to the American market remains critical, but Ottawa is now placing greater emphasis on having additional trade options. Canada's approach is therefore built around two tracks: continue negotiating with Washington while building stronger economic links elsewhere. The government has not announced an end to CUSMA or a break from the US market. Instead, it is preparing for tougher negotiations while seeking greater flexibility in Canada's wider trade policy.